Garrett, and I work within the Arts Council, and I think I'm chairing this session because I've been involved with a few things around internationalism over the last couple of years. A couple of years ago, a group of us set up this scheme called Inspiring Internationals, which Paul's going to say a bit more about later, which was a small grant scheme for organisations in the North East, which enabled them to invite people from other parts of the world to come and visit their organisation for a week and share best practice. And more recently, I've been working in Brussels at the North East England office, which Sarah Jane will be speaking about, to see if there's a role for the arts and culture of this region to fit with the RDA agenda, the European agenda, all that stuff that we hear from Europe, and profile some of our great things in Europe, make partnerships, and also bring people from Europe into this region. So we've got 4 interesting speakers today who have experience from different parts of the world, and are going to explore this issue, which is provocatively titled Jollies and Jaunts, Authentic Relationships that Spark New Ideas and Create Great Art. So with that, I'll hand over to Sarah Jane.
Thanks very much, Matthew. I think it's interesting that there's a link between cultural working and international working in the sense of some of the challenges and issues that we face. You know, some of the themes that we're picking up through this morning's discussion. It's sometimes difficult to measure, it's sometimes seen as an optional extra. Is it elitist? Is it expensive? And these are all things that make us a little bit cautious about both cultural working or about international working. And often when I'm in front of audiences from local authorities or from the business sector, and we talk about the importance of the European Union, and we talk about things like the fact that 80% of the legislation and policy that's applicable in the northeast of England starts life in Brussels. We talk about the way in which the European structural funds have transformed the region and the billions of European funding that's available through non-structural fund programmes that we could still be dipping into. And we talk about things like the role of the region in the global economy, and if we've learnt anything from the events of the past year, perhaps it's that we are ultimately always impacted by changes and policies in other parts of the world. And we can't afford to be inward looking. We've got to realise that this little region, this little country, is in fact part of a larger European continent, part of a European Union, and part of the world. And so, with that in mind, I think I'd like to sort of turn the provocation round and say, well, why are we so afraid of the international dimension of cultural working? Because for me it just seems to be something that is a given. In any field that you're working in, if you are an academic who is striving for excellence in chemical research or pharmaceutical research or computer science, you would not confine yourself to discussing your research simply with your peers from the same town or the same university. No, you would go out into a global marketplace of ideas. And in fact, that's exactly the same sort of thing that we can do in the cultural sector and in the broader policy agenda. And I think some of the issues that we were thinking about around sustainability, around reach, around excellence in culture are all things that can be informed and developed through international working. And the kind of challenges, the way in which we need to approach risk, the way in which we need to experience courage are the sorts of things that we need to think about when we get engaged in international working. So why are we afraid of it? Is it because we are afraid that if we don't approach it properly or we don't really know what we're doing, we might not get the results? Is it because we're afraid that it's going to require too much commitment? Are we concerned that we may come under challenge from the ladies and gentlemen of the press, and we may find it difficult to explain why we're going abroad? We don't have to explain why we're getting on a plane to go to Belfast or to Bristol or to Aberdeen, but as soon as we go across the North Sea or the English Channel, it becomes more difficult to explain to them. So why is that, and how can we help people understand? I just wanted to go through a few slides. I mean, I suppose this is just really to remind people of some of the great images and the great pieces of art that we have in this region that perhaps people in Europe don't know about. People have perhaps some outdated perception about the northeast of England. And these are things that can make an enormous impression on people when you take them to them. You see other regions in Europe using culture in really quite an innovative way. This is in our office. This is Margot Wallström. She's the Vice President of the European Commission. And this, thanks to our partnership with Arts Council, we were able to have an event in our office. These are dancers from Dance City, performers from The Sage, And these are all people who are working in the Commission and the Parliament, who are starting to learn a bit more about North East England and its culture. Some of you will be familiar with Creative Partnerships and the work that they're doing. Well, Creative Partnerships are now connected into European policy groups on arts and education. This is Paul Collard with 2 of our region's MEPs. So Creative Partnerships and the work they've done in the region now have a stake in taking forward EU arts and education policy. This is some of the work we've done with Media 19. You might be familiar with them, a community engagement company here in North East England. And this is some of the images that they've produced through the community engagement work they do, which we've been able to bring to a Brussels-based audience. We always link our work into the broader policy work that we're doing. So people are talking about climate change in Brussels. Often these policy conferences, often these policy conferences are a bit dull, lots of people in suits talking about wind turbines, accepting wind turbines as a given. So what can an artist bring to that debate? Alec Finley, who's the artist in residence, came to that debate and talked about wind turbines as contemporary public sculpture and about how the perception of windmills and wind turbines through Constable and onwards was something that we could perhaps relate to that might be able to help us in thinking about public engagement. Now that really strengthened the quality of the event that we were doing, and when you're competing in a marketplace of ideas and in a marketplace of influence in Brussels, to have something that's a bit different, a bit edgier, that demonstrates that in North East England we're really creative and vibrant and have something exciting and different to say, this can be really helpful. So that's a little bit about that. This year is actually the European Year of Creativity and Innovation, perhaps not particularly well publicised, but more than ever a real opportunity for organisations in the region to profile what they're doing at the European level. This is the Creativity Forum, which is coming up in the Committee of the Regions. AIDA in Wallsend are going, and so are the National Urban Circus Theatres. And we've facilitated Youth in Action funding for both of these young creative entrepreneurs from the North East to go to that Creativity Forum. This is Big M, which I guess Clymene will talk a little bit about, and which we're looking forward to seeing in Brussels as part of the Creativity Forum. And this is really just to say this all ties into a wider European agenda. Europe tends to think about things like energy or, energy, labelling, regulation. It's the European elections on the 4th of June. So given the power that the European Parliament has and the influence of European policy and European funding on what goes on in the North East, how can we work together across sectors to raise the profile of our region in some of these key issues that are really going to impact the way in which policy is delivered on the ground in the region? How can we use arts to explore some of those messages in perhaps a little bit more creative way than some other regions are doing? So this is the sort of thing that we're doing in our region on kind of broader issues, especially around climate change, around creativity and social inclusion. And it's wonderful for us that through the partnership with Arts Council, we've been able to bring a culture and creative element to that work. So I've only been allowed 5 minutes, so I think I've managed to stick to it. And I'll pass it on to Philip.
Thanks, Sarah Jane.